So we're going to talk about smart cities and the new way forward. And I had just released a report recently with JLL, so I'll combine some of that information. Also, this is the speed round. I love slides. I've got 40 slides in 20 minutes, so buckle up, it's going to go fast. So to start off, be patient. Because you might think, why are we talking about smart cities when we should be talking about AI and IoT? But these are the things that actually enable smart cities. And also be patient, because I know how this goes. People are going to get tired. Some people are going to take a nap. Some are going to do emails. Wake up at the end. The last couple slides explains the challenges the whole ecosystem faces right now and a potential solution for it. But to kick off, smart cities are difficult. And they also mean a lot of different things to the different stakeholders. If I'm a city, I'm worried about running it efficiently. If I'm a business, I just want to operate efficiently. And if I'm a citizen, I want my life to be better. So I decided to look at people's definitions, companies' definitions of what a smart city is, and there's hundreds of them. So then I decided, well, why don't we try to create it? What is a definition that really applies to everybody? Because a smart city isn't just technology. It's policies and strategies that leverage technology and data to deliver initiatives that, number one, deliver efficiency, sustainability, and improved decision-making for the cities themselves, create a transparent, efficient, and competitive environment for businesses, and improve inclusiveness, services, and the quality of life for its citizens. Now that's great to have that, but then you realize the challenge we face, because that's all encompassing. So it's not that easy. So before we go any farther, I want to do a quick vote. How many people think that cities right now are transforming the way we work, live, and play? Okay. And how many think they're overhyped and undervalued? All right, I've already got a lot of people falling asleep, so I better get going on this one. So I think it's a little bit of both. Because the reality is, cities can be complicated. If you've ever had to work with them as a vendor, it can be frustrating and they can be overhyped. But they are the future. And it's like most things with technology. Eventually, we're going to exceed our expectations. Most likely, it's going to take us a lot longer to get there. But then, of course, everybody likes numbers. So I've done it for you. I spent yesterday morning looking at forecasts. And this is going to make everything so simple and clear that you'll understand how big the market size actually is. Maybe. This is just a few of the people who are doing smart city forecasts. So if you look at 2023, it could be worth as little as $190 billion versus $1.9 trillion. 10% or 10 times the amount, slightly different. Then you go into 2024, it could be as little as 330 versus 3.18 trillion. And you might notice this isn't a typo. Zion actually publishes two. This is the IoT component, and then this is the whole smart city component. And then you go out to 2025, and again, it just is a wide range of what it could be. And this is what I mean. It's difficult to say what a smart city is. To be honest, every one of these could be correct, depending on how they define a smart city. Every one of them equally could be very, very wrong. So it'll be fun to see how it actually plays out. But this isn't even my favorite one. This was my favorite forecast. ABI said, just 5G component for connected cities will generate USD $17 trillion in economic growth by 2035. And I love this because it got a lot of headlines recently. But I do have a couple questions. Number one, I deal with a lot of the operators and network equipment manufacturers. They don't know the use cases yet of how we're going to drive this growth. So what do these guys know that we don't and what they don't? And the next thing is 2035, that's like my retirement age. What's 16 years from now? How do you forecast the value that far ahead? And then I thought, well, why don't I go back 16 years? Could I have forecasted where we are today? So go back 16 years. This was the best-selling phone in 2013, or 2003. So this is the Nokia, I think it's the 1100. It sold 250 million. The next best-selling phone sold 50. Now, has anyone used one of these old Nokia phones? There's quite a few old people here. What did you do with it? You played Snake. Okay? You played Snake, and you're telling me if I was playing Snake back then, I could have forecasted the impact that iOS and Android would have had in our industry, and 3G and 4G? So what I think about these things, this is the first takeaway. Always question the hype. A lot of these numbers are going to be written to actually get headlines. There is value in them. You need to understand how it's going to be segmented, but don't think they're going to be real a lot of the time. I'm pretty sure, and I've actually put a note in my calendar for 2035 to come back and check that number. And I'll do a LinkedIn post if there's even LinkedIn at that time. It could be, maybe I'll do it via hologram. All right, why do we need smart cities? Everyone knows these numbers about populations are moving to urban areas. But this is the impact in Asia. You've got 90 million people moving to an urban area in ASEAN by 2030 alone, 255 million by 2050 in China, and 416 million in India. That is going to create an incredible strain on our cities. And it has a lot of impacts on the infrastructure, on traffic, which we all love, lack of affordable housing. Where are we going to put all these people right now? What about the rise in socioeconomic inequality and increased pollution? So these things are challenging. And what you need then to address those challenges are strategies. And this is from a report from Roland Berger in March this year. They looked across the whole world, and 153 cities have published a smart city strategy. So that sounds good until you realize there's well over 1,000 smart cities. So we're running at about 15% of the cities actually have a strategy. A little bit worse, only 15 of those have strategies that include targets and activities. And only 8 have strategy that includes implementation. Now let that sink in for a second. Of the 1,000+ cities, only 8 have strategies that include implementation. We are at the very early days, and really, this is the Smart City Challenge. It's like this little kid looking up all these steps. How am I going to start climbing them one step at a time? So it's going to be an interesting one. And the reason why is there's a lot of challenges. Number one, they're complicated. Think about Shanghai. What if they asked me to write the smart city strategy for Shanghai? 24 million people, 33 agencies, 16 districts, 99 sub-districts, 3 counties, and 205 towns in Shanghai. Trying to actually herd all those cats into a single strategy is very difficult. Funny enough, they've actually done a pretty good job of it. So the most important thing is start out with your PMO, and that should help you break down the silos, become a single point of contact. The most important thing for cities when they do a PMO is to make sure they're an enabler and not a blocker. There's a lot of vendors in the audience. If you ask any of them what it's like to deal with most PMOs around the region, it can be very difficult. Leo from Taipei is in the back. He runs the best PMO that I've seen anywhere in Asia or in the world, and they're a true enabler, and we'll talk more about them later. Next, cultural change is difficult, and that's a good segue into Leo again, because when he's setting up Smart Taipei, we talked to him about the challenges he faced. And he said it isn't the technology. It's culture is the first thing you need to deal with when you implement something different in the public sector. Technology is the easy part. Now think about that. It's the cultural part that he's struggling with more than the technology. Next thing is governance. How do you actually control all these projects? Tokyo has 360 specific policy targets with 4-year work schedules with each. So the PMO isn't about sticking a few people to oversee this stuff. It's about creating your own management firm inside of your city to start managing these processes. But that's just on that side of the governance. You've also got to manage incidents. And this is a solution I really like out of Jakarta. It's with a company called Clue. And what they're doing is engaging the public to actually start capturing where there's incidents of crime, fire, flooding, illegal rubbish dumping, but then also reporting back so they can actually record where these things have been captured and when they've been fixed. Now that's great because what they've done is they're not just fixing something for the city, they're giving value back to the citizens. You told me something was broke, I fixed it within 24 hours. So having governance around that, not just about capturing information, but delivering it and showing it back. Number 4, solutions are complex. This is pretty much how any IoT or smart city solution works. You've got a thing that captures data. It transmits over some type of a network through 5 different types of platforms, and you get an app on the end. All of it has to be secured, it has to be integrated and supported, and of course you got to store the data. But when you think about that, that's multiple products from multiple vendors for one solution. So how do you actually find out which use cases you're going to do, which of those vendors are you going to be pulling in, and which technologies do you want? So it is very complicated. Also, when you start looking at it, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of vendors in that space. And if you go out there, all of them claim mine's the best device, network, platform, storage, security solution, and this is why you should pick me as your strategic partner. It's not that easy. You really got to find the diamonds in the rough, and it's very difficult for a city, for a business, for anyone. Also, funding is limited. I really wish cities would write blank checks because then I'd be selling a lot more into cities. They don't. We heard all these great things about smart cities. We assumed that they were going to have massive budgets. They don't. They operate like a normal business, and they're very, very risk averse, more than a lot of normal enterprises. So what they prefer is more of a proof of concept model. They want to test it. They want risk sharing up front, which means we're actually moving away from a CapEx model where you pay for a solution, and they want things that are more OpEx. And let's face it, the ICT vendors aren't always set up for that. So what they're actually looking to do is try to adapt their model, which allows us to do testing, which means their cost of sale goes higher and their risks go up as well. And that's why you're starting to see a lot of people, in cities especially, try to figure out who can actually help me, who can do some initiatives with me. And this is where you're seeing a lot of public-private partnerships. And I like it because there's all these different types of models, and they're really taking off. And there's some great examples of this. So Alibaba in Hangzhou, which is its home city, created the city brain. And this is one of my favorite city solutions I've seen. Hangzhou used to be the 5th most congested city in China. And if you've ever been to any city in China, you know there's a lot of congestion. So this city brain captures disparate data sources. They capture traffic cameras, GPS data from public transport, et cetera, 1,000 stoplights, and they put it all together to redesign the way the city flows. They adjust stoplights at different times of the day. So what's happened? They rank that now as the 57th most congested city in China. That's big progress. That also means that people have noticed that, and they're selling it in cities across China, but also into Macau and KL. And if you spend much time in KL, Wing, I know you're in here somewhere, yes, traffic there can be very bad. Although your driver is brilliant for getting me around town. But there's a downside. So we'll look at PPPs in China. So first of all, there's a ton of them. So in 2018, there was 14,220 PPPs going on in China at a $2.7 trillion market value. One quick question, how does that 2.7 go back to all those forecasts we saw about in the earlier slides? But we'll not talk about that one now. But the other downside is, also during 2018, they shelved or canned 2,407 of those PPPs worth $360 billion. So that's about 16, 17% they actually canceled because of, it could be bad governance, it could be not meeting the objectives, it could be corruption. There's still challenges. Just because you set up a PPP doesn't mean it's always going to work. So takeaway number 2. When we look at this, all those challenges I just talked about, which is what the 35 people we interviewed in that Smart City report said were their biggest challenges, it wasn't about the technology. Most of the biggest challenge, the greatest challenge, is us as people. So we need to address that. The elephant in the room, cybersecurity. I love the fact that Adrian's slide showcased that it was only ranked, I think, number 9th or 9% value cybersecurity. Great, expect a lot more breaches coming up. This is the best stat. When people talk about the real risks of security, look what's happened in London at these 4 locations. They've had 109 million cyber attacks at Kew Gardens, Imperial War Museum, Tate Gallery, and National History Museum. They're not going after central government. They're going after places people visit. And 75% of those were spyware attacks targeting confidential information for the people who had been there. But let's London. What goes on here? Singapore has had some problems recently as well. We had a breach of 1.5 million patient medical records, including the Prime Minister, 800,000 blood donors, and 14,200 HIV-positive residents. And that's in a population of 5.6 million. Malaysia, they leaked 46 million mobile subscriber data. Now this actually is there is a good piece of news here. There's only a 32 million population, which means the mobile penetration rate in Malaysia is really high. That's really good. Bad news is it's all now been leaked. So that's a downside. So we think about smart cities and there's simple devices. Even the most simple device creates massive risks. If you go back to what happened in Vegas, some hackers stole the high roller data out of a casino by hacking into a thermostat inside of a fish tank. Okay, a fish tank. So we now need security firms that focus on fish thermometers. In Singapore, we're doing pilots now around smart plugs, but you can actually remotely control those plugs and cause power surges. We're doing pilots around other things as well, like smart meters, but if I can hack into that, I can change the bills. I could go to my neighbor and actually try and screw him on his bills and ring it up. Like, Adrian, if you live next to me, I definitely have to test that on you. Panic buttons. If I can hack into the panic buttons, I can create chaos for emergency services. If I do surveillance cam, I can capture data privacy information and security information. And if I can access the streetlights, I can black out a city and I can create chaos. Now, these are simple devices, simple solutions that have massive security risks. If you want to know how to secure these things, Singapore is great at doing technical requirement documents. So TR64 is the guideline for IoT security for a smart nation. If you're looking at deploying solutions, read through it, understand what they've gone through. They've done the hard work on this. Also, Microsec is a company, it's a Singaporean startup that is actually helping them secure all of these different proof of concepts right now. So it's a company that basically can encrypt the endpoint. So keep an eye on this stuff. Takeaway number 3, ignore security at your peril. If that's true and only 9% are concerned about it, I should start a new career as a hacker because there's a lot of money out there, except I'm not smart enough. All right, what should cities do now? Number 1, innovate. And I don't mean Pepper. I hate Pepper. He's been around a long time, and he's not that exciting. I want to see more interesting things than Pepper. I was in Seoul's Incheon Airport a couple weeks back. They've got cobots with big screens on them, or robots with screens, that you can type in any question you have. It can show you the mapping. It'll actually guide you where you want to go. It gets more interesting. But innovation, we always think about the latest tech, and it's not the latest tech. It can also be a new method or idea. And if you think about it, we'll go back to Taipei again. Their innovation, and I think they have the most innovative strategy for a smart city globally, it wasn't about using tech all the time. It's about having a new approach. And they wanted to create the government as a platform and the city as a living lab. So what they did is they pulled the PMO outside of the government and then used a top-down approach where the government agencies became a customer of that PMO. So they capture the requirements of the government. And then what they do is they go out to the market and they talk to the customers, the consumers, the citizens. And they interviewed 32,000 of them to find out what they want out of a smart city. It's security, surveillance, less traffic, go figure. But once they had that, they knew the demand on both sides, so they proactively engaged, not reactively, proactively engaged 400 plus ICT vendors, and over the last year and a half, they've deployed 175 proof of concepts. Now, go find any city that's done that many proof of concepts. Does that mean all of them work? No, but it means they're experimenting, and we need that innovation, experimentation, and acceptance of failure to then move on to the next thing. Number 2, proven tech. Leverage what's out there today. In our buildings already, we've got biometric access, HVAC information, smart lighting, but they're all in different platforms, and it's very difficult to actually aggregate that data and leverage it. So there's a real market for companies that just do software and sit in the middle. And they go in there and take data off all these different platforms, combine it together, and take too much data and turn it into intelligence. I used to talk about a company out of the UK called Demand Logic. There's a new one now out of China called eQuota, and they're selling into some of the biggest shopping malls across China, which means scale is massive. And they're doing just that. They're aggregating data, and their message is this. It's as a service. I'm going to take your existing data, not sell you new hardware, just the data you have already, and I'm going to give you intelligence that's going to save you money. So keep an eye on companies like this. And then, of course, we've got emerging tech, AR, VR, which we saw is going to be very low. AR, we could be doing AR for the last 5-6 years, and we're not. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's us as people again. But these things are going to be exciting. 5G is going to be a great enabler. Drones are going to be fantastic once we figure out how to regulate them. Machine learning and deep learning will create great possibilities. You should be looking at these. Don't ignore them, but also don't assume that you're going to drive a lot of business benefit today. It's more about experimentation. So takeaway number 4, you can innovate without using the latest tech. And please don't buy any more Peppers. They're boring. Buy the next generation. There's something cooler and more interesting. So what should we do now? Collaborate. We're starting to get better at this. People realize they can't do it alone. The ASEAN Smart City Network brings together 26 cities from around the region to share best practice and strategy. That's a good idea. What you've also got in China is the PATH initiative. This brings together Ping An, Alibaba, Tencent, and Huawei, 4 of the biggest vendors in the world, to create a platform that they can then take out to those 500 plus smart cities in China to create testing grounds. So that's another good collaboration initiative from the supply side. But then you've got people starting to go across. And there's the Global Organization of Smart Cities, which has brought together 200 plus cities and enterprise customers to basically share best practice, do intercity proof of concepts, and bring it all together. So takeaway number 5, you can't do it alone. Collaborate or die, and collaborate across supply and demand. All right, for those of you who've been sleeping and doing emails, where do we go from here? This is where you wake up, okay? So the current state, what is actually going on? What are we trying to achieve in this room with all these things? We're trying to solve problem statements. We want to improve elderly care management. We want to improve the quality of life of somebody who lives in public housing. If I'm a business, it's about operational excellence or cost reduction or driving security. And to accomplish that, I want to leverage these enablers on the other side. The things like AI, 5G, leveraging eSIMs to have things come born connected, blockchain, different types of sensors or wearables, whatever it might be. And the way the industry works is we've got the supply side, and you've got 2 main components to it. You've got your technology vendors, which have been out there, the ICT vendors, for decades. they're trying to leverage those innovative solutions, enablers, but they tend to want things that are more proven. So a lot of the innovation comes from the bottom. It's those startups that are trying to drive the supply side and solve the problem statements. On the other side, you've got the demand side, and you've got a number of different types of cities. And let's face it, there's already 1,000+ smart cities out there. And then you've got your business customers. Those could be things in real estate, financial services. It could be a farmer that's sitting in Australia, or energy. This is complex. It looks simple if we're saying, I just want to use technology to solve a problem. And that makes sense. But you stick tens of thousands of entities in the middle, how do you harness that? How do you guide that in the right direction? And this is where I think we are making progress. I mentioned the ASEAN Smart City Network. So they do 26. This just gives you an idea. They're wrapping together the demand side of cities into one to make it easier. I mentioned the PATH initiative in China. That's combining technology vendors together to then take that out to the cities and business customers saying, we can solve problems for you. And then what we're finally seeing now is things like Go Smart coming across the cities and the technology vendors to bring it together and say, let's work on it together and solve these problems. But that's one part of it. The other part is how do we drive the innovation that's necessary? Number one, you've got corporate venture capital and innovation labs. So if I'm a big bank, if I'm a big real estate firm, I'm probably got a VC arm, and I'm probably trying to create a lab to test things out I might use. Same thing if I'm a technology vendor. They want to try and find that innovation. So that's one way they can go about it. Number two, there's things like talent incubators. So what you have is EF, or you've got Antler, and they say, you know what, actually, let me just find some really bright people, and I'm going to create a solution that leverages these enablers, and I'm going to take them out to the world. And that's another exciting idea. And then you've got accelerators. And there's all different types of accelerators. You've got some that are location-based. So Spark Labs has an accelerator in Taiwan, Korea, and in China. But they also have industry-focused ones. So they do ag tech out of Australia. They do energy out of Oman. So they're starting to break it down further. And now you're seeing technology accelerators. There'll be a lot of them now around blockchain especially going out. So that's progress. And the next step beyond that is you're seeing basically vertical-focused accelerators. And Spark Labs also doing a fintech accelerator in Shenzhen with Ping An. So now you're bringing together the power and might of somebody like Ping An and an accelerator. So this is the right direction we're going into. But something's still missing. And that's something that actually sits in the middle here and brings together supply and demand. That goes out and says, what do you need me to solve? I'm going to pull it from this side. But it's difficult because who sits in that space? Is it going to be a technology vendor? Probably not, because they're going to be selling their technology and they won't want to sell their competitors. On the demand side, the cities and business customers don't have all the resources to deliver that. So it's going to come from the startups, and there's a real opportunity for accelerator programs to move into that space. And what they should be doing is trying to find partnerships. And I mean literally go out to the demand side saying, partner with me, and then give me a place where I can take my startups and do pilots, and we can test them during the program. What we tend to do now is create startups and build them and hope it works when they go to market. What we need is people to bring it together saying, I've got it, let's test it, deliver it, and then the accelerator's over. So it's changing that whole mentality. And I have an announcement on this, Spark Labs is looking at that space right now. So they're creating a new global fund and an initiative that's going to be bringing this together. They're creating these partnerships right now. Some of the people who are involved in it are sitting in this room. But the idea is to bring the whole ecosystem together and drive it forward. Slight announcement, I've got a side project, and I'm going to be the managing partner of that initiative and fund as well. So if you want to find out more about it, come talk to me afterwards. Wing, we'll talk afterwards. Finally, last slide. We'll make it simple. Just remember 4 things from what I talked about today. Number 1, question the hype. There's always going to be a new, amazing market forecast with huge numbers. Question it. Why are they doing it? Is it the headline? Is it really going to be accurate? And does it really add value? Number 2, focus on people, not technology. The people part is the hard part. Number 3, innovate. It doesn't have to be the latest tech. It can just be a new process, a new way of doing things. Think about Type A. Leo's here. Go talk to him in the back and find out what he did, because it's really amazing. And finally, collaborate. We need to get everybody working together in this. I don't think it should just be Spark Labs in that space. I want to see everybody moving towards that space and bringing together supply and demand. I want to drive the industry forward, and hopefully, if we work together, we can. Thank you very much.